Hello again. This is another in a series of educational videos brought to you by San Diego Defenders. The topic of today's video is field sobriety tests. As an attorney who's represented people in DUI cases for over 16 years, often friends and family ask me, if I'm pulled over for a DUI, should I do the field sobriety tests? The answer is no. You are not required to do field sobriety tests. These tests are very inaccurate and very subjective. Chances are if the police officer is asking you to do these tests, he or she already thinks you're under the influence. And as people, that is subconsciously going to affect how they view these tests. Furthermore, there is no benefit to you to doing these tests. Often police officers will say, well, we need to decide if you're under the influence. So if you do these tests and do well, we'll let you go. Don't get suckered into that. The reality is, if you do well on the field sobriety tests, the officers will assume you're tolerant to alcohol or that you're close to the legal limit and still arrest you and still make you do a chemical test. If you do poorly on them, whether it's because of alcohol or not, they're going to conclude it's because of the alcohol in your system, and someday a prosecutor is going to be using that as evidence against you in court to say you were drunk that night. So there's no upside to doing the test. If you are sober, the chemical test you do after you're arrested will show that. There are different types of field sobriety tests. There are what are referred to as the standardized field sobriety tests, and there are three of those. One is the walk and turn test. The officer asks you walk heel to toe, out 9 steps and back 9 steps, and they're watching your balance, if you follow instructions, a number of other things. This test can be challenging to someone who has no alcohol in their system, especially if it's late at night and you're tired, and on a shoulder on the side of a road that's unlevel. There is no benefit to taking this test. The second standardized field sobriety test is the one-leg test, where they have you stand on one foot and count to 30. Again, whether you do well on this test or not isn't going to change anything in terms of whether you're arrested. The third standardized field sobriety test, the officer may give you and you don't even realize you're taking a field sobriety test. It's called the horizontal gaze nystagmus test. The officer will pass a pen or a finger back and forth in front of your eyes and ask you to follow it without moving your head. If the officer does this or asks you to take any field sobriety test, politely explain that you've learned from the internet, from friends you know, whatever sources, that field sobriety tests aren't accurate. You're concerned that because you're nervous you won't be able to do them well, and that you don't have good balance to begin with, and that you prefer not to do the tests. Keep very close track of what the police officer says to you after that. If they try and coerce you or con you into taking these tests, knowing that will be useful for your lawyer later on. There are other field sobriety tests that aren't part of the standardized field sobriety tests that are even more inaccurate and more subject to imprecise conclusions by the police officer. These include asking you to recite the alphabet, counting backwards from 75 to 55, tilting your head back and estimating 30 seconds in your head with your eyes closed, counting on your fingers, doing claps, etc. None of these have ever been scientifically linked to being able to show someone is under the influence. And again, there is no benefit to doing them. If you do them well, they'll conclude you're tolerant to alcohol or are close to the legal limit. And if you do poorly, they'll say it means you're drunk. Lastly, one of the field sobriety tests is a field breath test. Unless you are on probation for a DUI or under 21, you should never take the field breath test. The machine is very inaccurate, they're not properly calibrated regularly, and they tend to read much higher than your actual blood alcohol level. Furthermore, if you take this test, you're simply giving the police and the prosecutor more evidence to use against you after you've been arrested. You will have to do a blood or breath test after you've been arrested. That's required by California law. But there is no benefit to doing the field sobriety tests or the field breath tests prior to being arrested. Again, politely tell the officer you don't want to do them because you've been told in the past that they're very inaccurate and you're concerned about your own performance and inability to keep your balance, etc. We hope this is useful if you're ever stopped for a DUI. Take care.